Okay, so the neck and body are joined together. I'm now just checking where the fretboard will go, checking that for alignment along the length of the instrument, and then what I'll do is I'll just drill some little holes through the fretboard where the position markers will go into the neck itself, and put some little wooden pegs in there which will hold the fretboard in alignment. So the fretboard's been lined up, wooden pegs in. This piece of the tenon now is redundant, so I've cut that, so we remove that piece of the tenon, and now I'm going to clean up this surface ready for the first part of the fretboard extension. Well, I'm a bit of a kind of belt and braces sort of guy, so once the tenon has been glued in place, I then put in these dowels as just an extra measure to really lock it in, to give it a kind of a mechanical fixing. So all of this is going to be cleaned up, and then I'm going to start work on the fingerboard, the first part of the fingerboard extension, and this is a piece of walnut which has been made up of the offcuts of the back, so it should match the back and sides nicely. Well, I've always believed that the neck joint should be as rigid as possible. I'm sure there are many people who disagree with me, but there you go, that's my belief. And everything I've done so far is about that. The very snug tenon joint, the 4 pieces of dowel rod to lock it all in place. The last part of the jigsaw is this piece of walnut which forms the fretboard extension. What that also does is it guarantees that that tenon is never going to move, and also because this piece of wood will be in compression and it's going to be wedged between the top plate and the neck, it's going to limit any movement in this direction of the neck. So all of this makes an incredibly rigid neck joint. What I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this piece in with epoxy too. The reason being that there's a lot of end grain involved, and those of you who are woodworkers will know that your typical woodwork glues don't work particularly well on end grain. So that's the reason for using epoxy on this particular joint. So that's what I'm going to do now. Where you can see the first part of the fretboard support is in place. It's been plain flat with the neck and the fretboard sitting on there, held in place by some wooden pegs. This hasn't really been cleaned up. I won't do that until I shape the neck. So the next part is this piece of the fretboard support. Now it's really quite a tricky piece of woodwork. Part of it will be resting on the soundboard, on the top plate, but only up to about here where the neck block is. Then it's going to be kind of scalloped so it doesn't touch the top plate and hinder it from vibrating at all. Into the side of it I've got to drill some holes into which I'm going to put some metal inserts for screws to support the pick guard, finger rest, whatever you want to call it. And of course on this profile we've got a bit of fancy shaping to do. All of that's going to be done with some more walnut offcut from the back. So wish me luck, that's the next little tricky job to do. So here is the completed fretboard extension, and you wouldn't believe how long it's taken me to make this. There's about 3 or 4 hours work in that. Bonkers, isn't it? So it's been shaped to the end of the fretboard. We've got these 2 brass inserts, threaded inserts, so that will take two machine screws which will hold the pick guard finger rest in place. The sides have been chamfered so that it looks a little bit lighter, and also you can see that I've given the whole thing a couple of coats of sealer to stop this from ever drying out. And also you can see how lovely the black walnut is. So that's going to be glued into this position here. the problem with gluing it is that it's virtually impossible to clamp, because you've got to clamp it down and against this piece, and of course that's all a bit wobbly. So the only real way of doing that is to put a couple of screws in and use the screws to pull that into place, and then when the glue is set, take them out, and then I'll show you what I'll do with those holes. The top surface is a bit rough, but of course that's all going to be plain flat with the rest of the neck. So the glue's set, and I've just planed that. Latest addition to the family is this 120-year-old Stanley 101 violin maker's plane, which I've refurbished and made a new cap iron for out of brass. Works incredibly well on small areas like that. So this is now all flat. I can take the screws out which were holding it in place whilst the glue set. So they come out. There's a liberal coating of wax, paraffin wax, on those screws before they went in, because of course what you don't want is to find out that the screws have been glued in. So the next step for me now is to extend these slots for the carbon fibre, and the slots will come down over these holes, so in effect those holes will be plugged with the strips of carbon fibre. So we've got the slots now continuing into the fretboard extension. The carbon fibre will go into the slot, keeping the neck stiff and also tying together the neck and the fretboard extension. On top of the carbon fibre will go a piece of hardwood, walnut in this case, that will be stuck to the carbon fibre, and it will give the gluing surface for the fretboard. Now one thing, when you glue this in, you're going to glue it in with epoxy, is although it's got to be a good fit, it doesn't want to be a tight fit. The epoxy is a really kind of heavy viscous liquid, and as you know you can't compress a liquid, so if this is really tight and there's nowhere for the excess epoxy to escape from, you run the risk of splitting the neck if you're putting too much clamping pressure in there to squeeze everything down. Well, as always, thanks for taking the time to watch my videos. Clearly there are as many different constructional techniques as there are luthiers, and what I've shown you in this video is the way I prefer to work. So there it is, fretboard on later today, and hopefully playing in a couple of weeks. So see you soon, take care.